The blizzard outside was brutal, but nothing compared to the ice in Kevin's eyes when he stormed into the employee locker room. I was curled up on the wooden bench, trying to warm my frozen fingers around my battered paperback novel. My shift had ended an hour ago, but the snow was too thick to drive home safely. "You didn't clean the dishwasher properly," Kevin sneered, his voice dripping with that fake authority he loved to throw around. "Get back out there and fix it, but don't you dare clock in. You do this off the books, or you're fired." He stood there for a moment, that disgusting smirk spreading across his face like he'd just won some twisted game. Then he turned and walked out, leaving me sitting there in complete shock. My hands were shaking, and not from the cold anymore. The rage was building up inside me like a volcano about to explode. Kevin had pushed me around for months, but this was different. This was illegal. This was war. I closed my book slowly and stood up. My voice was barely a whisper, but every word was filled with fury. He wants war? Okay. 6 months earlier, I was just a 22-year-old college student trying to make ends meet. I was juggling 2 part-time jobs and a full course load, sleeping maybe 4 hours a night. When the casino kitchen posted an opening for a steward position, I jumped at the chance. The job seemed perfect at first. I'd be washing dishes and cleaning in their rotating restaurant system. Every day brought a new kitchen, new people, new challenges. The head chef was kind, and my coworkers actually cared about each other. For the first time in months, I felt hopeful about my future. The work was hard, but I didn't mind. I'd scrub giant pots until my arms ached, mop floors until they gleamed, and clean equipment that weighed more than I did. But I was good at it, and people noticed. My supervisors praised my work ethic, and I started making friends with the cooking staff. After 2 months of proving myself, they offered me full-time hours with benefits. Health insurance, dental coverage, paid time off. It felt like winning the lottery. I said yes immediately. Looking back, I should have known it was too good to be true. Everything started falling apart in month 3. The casino announced new policies that made my stomach drop. The sick note policy was canceled. No more paid sick days unless you were literally dying. Workers started showing up with fevers, throwing up in trash cans between orders because missing a shift meant missing rent money. I watched cooks flip steaks while pale and sweating, waitstaff serving customers while fighting back nausea. The kitchen became a breeding ground for whatever illness was going around. But nobody could afford to stay home. Then, the union-busting campaign began. Bright yellow posters appeared in every hallway, break room, and bathroom. "Unions destroy jobs," in bold red letters. Management held mandatory meetings where they explained how unions would steal our money and cost us our positions. The atmosphere changed overnight. People stopped talking about workplace problems. Complaints disappeared. Everyone was scared of being labeled a troublemaker. I kept my head down and focused on my work. I needed this job too badly to rock the boat. My student loans were piling up, and my car was making strange noises I couldn't afford to fix. But I was starting to realize that this place didn't care about us at all. The worst news came on a rainy Tuesday morning. Our supervisor gathered all the stewards for an emergency meeting. "The rotating schedule is over," she announced. "You'll now be permanently assigned to specific restaurants under their head chefs." My heart sank. I loved the variety of moving between kitchens. It kept the job interesting and let me learn different skills. Now I'd be stuck in one place, under one boss, doing the same tasks every single day. I got assigned to the steakhouse with 2 coworkers I actually liked, Maria and Todd. They were both kind people who looked out for each other. The head chef, Ramon, was tough but fair. He treated us with respect and never yelled unless someone was genuinely messing up. For a few weeks, things were actually okay. We developed a good rhythm, and I was learning how the steakhouse operated. Ramon even mentioned that I might be supervisor material someday. Then Ramon got promoted to executive chef of the main dining room. I was happy for him. He deserved it. But my stomach twisted when I heard who was replacing him. Kevin Rodriguez, the assistant chef everyone whispered about, the one with the attitude problem and the wandering eyes. My peaceful little corner of the casino was about to become a nightmare. Kevin looked completely average when he first walked into our kitchen. Medium height, brown hair, forgettable face. If I'd passed him on the street, I wouldn't have looked twice. But there was something in his eyes that made me uncomfortable from day one. The first week was quiet. Kevin seemed to be learning the ropes, figuring out how Ramon had run things. I thought maybe the rumors about him were exaggerated. Maybe he'd be okay to work with. Then came the water fountain incident. I was refilling my water bottle in the break room when Kevin appeared behind me like a shadow. "Where do you think you're going?" he demanded. "Just grabbing water," I said, confused. "The break room's right down the hall." His face twisted into an ugly expression. "Use the waitstaff station, or I write you up for leaving your post." "We're not allowed to use that station," I explained. "The servers get in trouble if we—" Before Kevin could respond, Ramon walked by and overheard. "What's the problem here?" he asked. Kevin's whole demeanor changed instantly. "Oh, nothing, chef. Just explaining procedures." Ramon looked at me, then at Kevin. "Stewards can use any water fountain they want. It's company policy." Kevin's face went red, but he couldn't argue with his superior. He mumbled something about misunderstanding and walked away. But the look he gave me, as he left, told me everything I needed to know. This was personal now. Kevin's true colors emerged over the next few weeks. He had a pattern, and it was ugly. He only targeted the women on staff, finding petty reasons to yell and humiliate us in front of others. He'd call Maria and the other female cooks to help him prep vegetables for hours, leaving me alone to handle all the heavy cleaning work. Massive stock pots, grease traps, floor drains, everything that required serious muscle. When I fell behind, he'd act like I was lazy. Can't handle the workload? He'd sneer when I was sweating through my uniform. "Maybe you should find an easier job." The worst part was how he'd smile while doing it, like he genuinely enjoyed making us miserable. Maria pulled me aside one afternoon, looking worried. "He's marking territory," she whispered. "Testing to see who he can push around." I started paying closer attention to Kevin's behavior. The way he'd hover too close when talking to female staff, how he'd find excuses to touch shoulders or arms during conversations, the comments about our appearances that walked the line of harassment. I began documenting everything. Dates, times, witnesses. Something told me I'd need evidence eventually. And I was right. The humiliation came on a busy Friday night. Kevin called me to the office mid-shift while I was elbow-deep in greasy fish pans. I was drenched in sweat, covered in food particles, and smelled like a combination of bleach and seafood. Inside the office was a woman I'd never seen before, well-dressed, professional, clearly management. She introduced herself as Linda, the steakhouse manager. Kevin looked at me with that disgusting smirk and announced loudly, "She stinks. Look at this, Linda. This is what we're dealing with." Linda's eyebrows shot up. "Excuse me?" Kevin started backpedaling immediately, his confidence evaporating. "I mean, the hygiene standards, you know." Linda walked over and actually smelled my uniform. She turned to Kevin with a look that could melt steel. "This is sweat and cleaning chemicals. She's been working. Fix the ventilation and get better aprons. Don't blame the workers." Kevin's face went white. Linda continued, "And from now on, any discussions about staff need to include a witness from HR." As they both left, Kevin shot me a look of pure hatred. But I felt something I hadn't in months. Hope. Someone with real power had just put Kevin in his place. And now he couldn't target me without oversight. Just when things seemed to be looking up at work, my personal life crashed down around me. I woke up one morning to find my bank account had been completely drained. Someone had hacked in and stolen everything. My rent money, grocery money, even the $20 I'd been saving for gas. 2 weeks later, I got a letter from the IRS. Someone had filed a tax return using my social security number and stolen my refund. The identity theft was complete and devastating. I had to drop out of college immediately. I couldn't afford tuition, books, or even gas to drive to campus. The dreams I'd been working toward for years disappeared overnight. My landlord wasn't sympathetic. I fell 3 months behind on rent and had to make the heartbreaking decision to rehome one of my cats. I couldn't afford to feed both of them anymore. The worst part was hiding it from everyone at work. I'd spend my lunch breaks walking through the employee parking lot, collecting aluminum cans to turn in for gas money. I'd pretend I was getting fresh air while actually hunting for anything worth a few cents. My coworkers had no idea I was sleeping in my car some nights because I couldn't afford to heat my apartment. Pride kept me from asking for help, but desperation was starting to win. I finally worked up the courage to file formal complaints about Kevin's behavior. I had pages of documentation, every inappropriate comment, every instance of singling me out, every time he'd humiliated me in front of others. The HR representative, a tired-looking woman named Carol, barely glanced at my paperwork. She listened to my story with the enthusiasm of someone watching paint dry. "What exactly do you want us to do about it?" she asked when I finished. I stared at her in disbelief. "Investigate? Address the harassment? Make it stop?" Carol sighed and shuffled my papers into a folder. "I'll look into it." My head supervisor was even worse. When I brought up Kevin's treatment of female staff, he actually laughed. "You need to grow thicker skin," he said. "This is a kitchen, not a daycare." That's when it hit me. There was no cavalry coming. No hero was going to swoop in and save me from Kevin's abuse. If I wanted this to stop, I'd have to find a way to do it myself. But how could someone like me take down someone with Kevin's authority and connections? I was about to find out. Slowly, quietly, other women started sharing their stories about Kevin. It always happened in whispers, during brief moments when he wasn't around. "He cornered me in the walk-in cooler last week," one cook told me. "Just stood too close and wouldn't move when I tried to leave." "He told me my uniform was too tight," another said, then suggested I let him help me find a better size in the storage room. The stories were all similar: inappropriate comments, invasion of personal space, abuse of power, but none of them had reported it officially. They were all too scared of retaliation. I started keeping a master log of everything, every incident, every witness, every pattern of behavior. If HR wouldn't take individual complaints seriously, maybe they'd pay attention to a documented pattern of harassment. A line cook named James pulled me aside one afternoon, looking worried. "I've seen how Kevin watches you," he said quietly. "Don't trust him alone, ever, and if you need backup, just yell. Some of us are paying attention." Knowing I had allies made me feel stronger, but it also made me realize how serious the situation was becoming. Kevin wasn't just a bad boss, he was dangerous. Before all this started, I had dreams, real dreams about my future. I'd been saving money to buy my parents' old cabin in the mountains. It was a tiny place, but it was peaceful and beautiful. I could picture myself living there, maybe starting a small business, having a garden. That dream was dead now. Between the identity theft and this job barely paying my bills, I was drowning financially. The cabin would probably be sold to strangers while I was stuck washing dishes for a tyrant. The final blow came when a supervisor position opened up in the main kitchen. I'd been training newer employees for months, showing them the systems, helping them improve their efficiency. I knew I was qualified. They gave the job to Derek, a guy I'd personally trained just 2 months earlier. He was nice enough, but he didn't know half of what I did about the operations. When I asked why I wasn't considered, they gave me vague answers about team dynamics and cultural fit. But I knew the real reason. Kevin had poisoned them against me. Standing in that parking lot after the announcement, I felt something break inside me. All those years of working hard, being reliable, going above and beyond, none of it mattered if someone with power decided they didn't like you. I was never going to escape this place. Kevin's psychological warfare escalated after I lost the promotion. He'd walk past my station whistling cheerfully, staring at me with that disgusting smirk. Sometimes he'd just stand there watching me work, not saying anything, just making his presence felt. The worst was when he'd mutter things just loud enough for me to hear. "Some people never learn their place," he'd say while passing by, or, "You'll never be more than a dishwasher." One afternoon, I was scrubbing a particularly stubborn pot when I heard him behind me. "This is as good as it gets for you. Better get used to it." I threw the pot into the sink harder than I meant to. The clang echoed through the kitchen, and for a moment everyone stopped working. I was shaking with rage, my hands gripping the edge of the sink until my knuckles went white. Kevin just laughed and walked away. That night, I sat in my car in the employee parking lot, crying until I couldn't breathe. I felt trapped, powerless, completely alone. Kevin had won, and he knew it. But sometimes when you hit rock bottom, something interesting happens. Sometimes you find strength you didn't know you had. Sometimes you decide to fight back. Rock bottom had a taste. It tasted like instant noodles for the 5th day in a row because that's all I could afford. It felt like sleeping in my car because the heater in my apartment was broken and I couldn't pay to fix it. I was down to my last $40, and most of that had to go to cat food and gas. I'd been surviving on free crackers from the employee break room and whatever expired food the cooks would sneak me. Maria found me crying in the bathroom one afternoon. "What's wrong, honey?" she asked, genuine concern in her voice. "Just tired," I lied, wiping my eyes. "Long week." She didn't believe me, but she didn't push. Instead, she started bringing me extra sandwiches from home, claiming she'd packed too much lunch. Other coworkers began quietly helping too. Granola bars left in my locker, expired meat from the kitchen that was still perfectly good. Someone even taped a $20 bill to my locker with a note that just said, "Hang in there." The kindness of my coworkers gave me something Kevin's cruelty couldn't take away: hope. They saw what was happening to me, and they cared. They were rooting for me to survive this. And that's when I made a decision that would change everything. I was going to survive, and I was going to take Kevin down while doing it. The opportunity came on the worst possible night. There was a huge concert at the casino, which meant our restaurant was packed beyond capacity. The kitchen was chaos. Orders flying, everyone running around, stress levels through the roof. Outside, a blizzard was dumping snow faster than the plows could clear it. The parking lot was a sheet of ice, and visibility was almost zero. I decided to wait it out in the employee locker room after my shift ended. I was curled up on the bench with my paperback, finally getting a moment of peace after the insane dinner rush. My hands were warming up, and I was actually enjoying my book for the first time in weeks. That's when Kevin burst through the door with that look I'd learned to fear. The one that meant he was about to make my life miserable. "The dishwasher wasn't cleaned properly," he announced, his voice dripping with fake authority. "Night crew complained about it." I knew that was a lie. I'd cleaned that machine perfectly, and night crew hadn't even started their shift yet. "Go fix it," Kevin continued, that disgusting smirk spreading across his face. "But don't clock in. You do this off the books or you're fired." He stood there savoring the moment, thinking he'd finally broken me completely. But he was wrong. I stared at Kevin for a long moment, letting his words sink in. He was asking me to commit wage theft. Not just asking, threatening my job if I didn't. This was it. This was the line he'd finally crossed that I could prove, that couldn't be dismissed or ignored. He just handed me the weapon I needed to destroy him. "Okay," I whispered, my voice steady despite the rage burning inside me. Kevin's smirk widened. He thought he'd won. He thought he'd finally broken my spirit completely. He turned and walked out, probably planning to gloat to his friends about putting me in my place. I stood up slowly, my legs shaking, not from fear, but from adrenaline. For months, Kevin had been chipping away at my confidence, my dignity, my sense of self-worth. But this time was different. This time, he'd made a mistake. A big one. I walked toward the kitchen with purpose. Every step was calculated, every move planned. Kevin wanted to play games? Fine. But this time, I was playing to win, and I was about to show him what happened when you push the wrong person too far. I marched into the kitchen like a woman on a mission. The night crew stewards looked up in confusion when they saw me. They knew my shift was over. What was I doing back here? "Kevin said you guys complained about the dishwasher not being cleaned properly," I announced loudly, making sure everyone could hear me. The night steward, Marcus, looked completely baffled. "What? We didn't complain about anything. We haven't even seen Kevin tonight." "That's weird," I said, raising my voice even more. "He just told me I had to come back and clean it again. Off the clock. Said I'd be fired if I didn't." The kitchen went quiet. Everyone stopped what they were doing and stared at me. I could see the shock and anger on their faces as they realized what Kevin had tried to make me do. "That's illegal," Marcus said flatly. "That's wage theft." "I know," I replied, already moving toward the dishwasher. "But he said I'm fired if I don't do it." I started cleaning the already spotless machine, making sure to be as loud and obvious as possible. Every clang of the metal parts, Every splash of water was announcement of Kevin's illegal demand. Word was spreading through the kitchen like wildfire. Within minutes, the night supervisor, Janet, came rushing into the kitchen. She looked panicked, like someone had told her there was an emergency. "What's going on here?" she demanded. I stopped cleaning and turned to face her, my expression calm and controlled. "I was ordered to clean the dishwasher off the clock. Kevin threatened to fire me if I didn't comply." Janet's face went pale. "He what?" "He said the night crew complained about it not being clean," I explained. "But Marcus says they never complained. Kevin just wanted me to work for free." The kitchen was dead silent. Everyone was watching this unfold, realizing they were witnessing something historic. Kevin had finally gone too far and someone was calling him out. Janet looked around at all the witnesses, then back at me. "How do I file a formal complaint?" I asked quietly. "Come with me," she said immediately. "We're calling HR right now." As we walked toward the office, I felt something I hadn't experienced in months. Power. For the first time since this nightmare began, I wasn't the victim. I was the one in control. The next morning, I got a phone call that changed everything. It was Linda, the steakhouse manager, and her voice was urgent. "I need you to come in immediately," she said. "Don't clock in, just come straight to my office. It's important." I was exhausted from the previous night's drama, but curiosity won. I threw on my uniform and drove to the casino, my mind racing with possibilities. When I walked into Linda's office, I nearly stopped in my tracks. Every manager in the steakhouse was there. Linda, the assistant manager, the HR representative, even the casino's head of operations. This was serious. And sitting in the corner, looking smaller than I'd ever seen him, was Kevin. His face was pale, and he wouldn't make eye contact with anyone. "Please sit down," Linda said, gesturing to a chair across from her desk. The atmosphere in the room was electric. I could feel the tension, the weight of what was about to happen. Kevin's hands were shaking slightly, and he kept staring at the floor. "We pulled the security footage from last night," Linda began. And that's when I knew Kevin was finished. The security footage was devastating for Kevin. The cameras had captured everything, him walking into the locker room with that smug expression, emerging minutes later with an even bigger smirk, clearly pleased with himself. "The audio is even worse," Linda said, her voice cold. "We can hear every word you said to her." Kevin tried to defend himself, his voice shaky and desperate. "She misheard me. I never said anything about not clocking in." "We have it on tape, Kevin," the HR representative said flatly. "Your exact words were, 'Don't clock in or you're fired.'" Kevin's story fell apart immediately. First, he claimed I misunderstood. Then he said he was joking. Then he tried to blame my attitude for the whole situation. He contradicted himself 4 times in 10 minutes. The managers just sat there, watching him dig his own grave deeper with every word. Finally, Linda slammed a thick folder onto her desk. "Kevin, you instructed an employee to commit wage theft. You threatened her job if she didn't comply. This is illegal, and it's grounds for immediate termination." Kevin's face went white. For months, he'd terrorized me and my coworkers, thinking he was untouchable. Now he was realizing just how wrong he'd been. The managers turned to me with apologetic expressions. "We want to make this right," Linda said. "We're prepared to offer you compensation for last night, and we're implementing new policies to prevent this from happening again." I looked at Kevin, sitting there broken and defeated, then back at the managers. "I'll stay," I said carefully, "but only if Kevin never speaks to me again. Ever. Not about work, not about anything." "Done," Linda said immediately. Kevin opened his mouth like he wanted to protest, but Linda held up her hand. "You're in no position to negotiate, Kevin. You're lucky we're not pressing criminal charges." The room fell silent. Kevin stared at the floor, his shoulders slumped in defeat. The man who had terrorized me for months looked like a scared child. "You'll be transferred to a different department," Linda told me. "Under Chef Rodriguez. He specifically requested you for his team." Ramon, my old boss, the one who had always treated me with respect, he was throwing me a lifeline. As I left that office, I felt lighter than I had in months. Kevin's reign of terror was over, and mine was just beginning. The change was immediate and dramatic. Under Ramon's leadership, I remembered why I'd actually enjoyed this job once. He treated me like a valuable team member, asked for my input on procedures, and never once made me feel small or worthless. Kevin, meanwhile, had been transferred to the breakfast kitchen, the least desirable assignment in the casino. I'd see him occasionally in the hallways, but he'd look away immediately, refusing to make eye contact. Word of what happened spread through the entire casino. Other employees started coming forward with their own Kevin stories, emboldened by my success. HR was suddenly flooded with complaints about his behavior. My coworkers rallied around me like never before. They'd heard about my financial struggles through the employee grapevine, and they started looking out for me in small but meaningful ways. Extra food, rides home when my car wouldn't start, even a collection to help with my rent. But the best part was the opportunity Ramon presented to me a few weeks later. "I'm recommending you for the supervisor position in my department," he said. "You've earned it." After months of being told I'd never amount to anything, someone was finally recognizing my worth. Kevin's final meltdown happened 3 weeks later, and it was spectacular. He'd been spiraling since his demotion, and everyone could see it. He was making mistakes, showing up late, snapping at coworkers. It all came to a head during the lunch rush. I was working in the main kitchen when I heard shouting from the breakfast area. Kevin was having a full tantrum, screaming at a newer employee about something trivial. "This is all her fault," he yelled. And I knew he was talking about me. "She turned everyone against me. She ruined everything." The entire kitchen stopped working. Cooks, servers, managers, everyone stared at Kevin as he completely lost control. His face was red, spit flying as he ranted about how unfair everything was. Not a single person defended him. Not one. The coworkers who used to fear him now looked at him with disgust and pity. A senior chef finally stepped in and escorted Kevin away from the kitchen. He didn't come back that day, or the next day. On the third day, there was a brief announcement that Kevin had resigned to pursue other opportunities. Nobody was sad to see him go. Kevin's last day was anticlimactic. No announcement, no farewell party, no acknowledgement of his time there. He just cleaned out his locker and left through the back door like a thief in the night. The next day, I brought pizza for the entire kitchen staff. It was a small gesture, but it felt like a celebration. The toxic atmosphere Kevin had created was finally gone, replaced by the collaborative spirit I remembered from my early days. "We should have done this sooner," Maria laughed, biting into her slice. "Should have stood up to him together." She was right. Kevin had only been able to terrorize us because we'd been isolated, afraid to speak up, worried about our jobs. But united, we were stronger than any bully. A week later, Linda called me into her office again. This time, the meeting was much more pleasant. "The supervisor position is yours," she said, sliding the paperwork across her desk. "Full-time, benefits, and a substantial pay raise." I stared at the offer letter, hardly believing it was real. After months of being told I was worthless, I was finally getting the recognition I deserved. That night, I called my parents to share the good news. For the first time in over a year, I had hope for my future. 6 months later, I was thriving in my new role. The supervisor position came with real authority and respect from my colleagues. I implemented new training programs, improved efficiency systems, and created a workplace culture where everyone felt valued. I was finally able to move to a better apartment, get my car fixed, and even start saving money again. The dream of buying my parents' cabin seemed possible once more. But the real victory wasn't financial. It was personal. I'd learned that I was stronger than I thought, that I could stand up for myself when it mattered most. Kevin had tried to break me, but instead, he'd taught me what I was truly capable of. I heard through the grapevine that Kevin was working at a fast food restaurant across town, making minimum wage. Part of me felt sorry for him, but mostly I felt relieved. He couldn't hurt anyone else the way he'd hurt me. One evening, as I was closing up the kitchen, I found myself thinking about that night in the locker room when Kevin made his final, fatal mistake. He thought he was ending my career, but he was actually ending his own. Sometimes justice isn't loud or dramatic. Sometimes it's just quiet persistence and refusing to give up. These days I work for a different company entirely, a place that values its employees, treats everyone with respect, and has actual consequences for harassment and abuse. I'm a kitchen supervisor with full benefits, a stable home, and genuine respect for my colleagues. Every evening, I go home to my cozy apartment, feed my cat, light a candle, and curl up with a good book. Just like I was doing that night when Kevin tried to destroy me. But now the reading is peaceful, not an escape from misery. Sometimes I think about Kevin and wonder if he learned anything from what happened. Probably not. People like him rarely take responsibility for their actions. But that's not my problem anymore. I learned something important through that whole experience. Justice isn't always loud and dramatic. Sometimes it's quiet and patient. Sometimes it's simply living well and sleeping peacefully, knowing you stood up for yourself when it mattered most. And sometimes the best revenge is just being happy. Kevin tried to make me believe I'd never be more than a dishwasher. Instead, he helped me discover that I could be whatever I set my mind to. For that, I suppose I should thank him.